Hello, everybody. I'll sit down, but hopefully you can all hear us and you can see us well. I'm Sean Coughlin, and I am a BBC education correspondent. With me is Daphne Koller from Coursera. And Daphne, I'm sure you'll be aware, is one of the founders and one of the guiding lights of probably the most influential MOOC on the planet, really. Coursera has grown and grown and grown. And it's had a profile that's slightly different from some of the other ones. I think of it being more business-like, something that's about something not just an academic experiment, something that is really reshaping the future of higher education. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat. It is quite a short chat, so we're going to rattle through some questions. And hopefully, I'm not sure there'll be time for questions now, but afterwards we're going to have another session with some CEOs. So hopefully, if you have any thoughts, you'll stick around to raise them. So I'll take my chair. And I suppose, first of all, Daphne, what I think would be interesting for people would be to know, where has Coursera reached? Because it feels like you've been around forever, but you're still a fairly young company. And your profile has grown very high, and you've changed a lot. Where have you got to now? Where are you up to?
Well, it's only been 4.5 years. It's hard to believe, even for me. We have close to 20 million learners in every single country around the world. Only about 30% are in the United States, 40% are from emerging economies. We have 145 partners in 6 different continents, and I think we teach in 10 different languages right now, so a lot of growth.
And when the MOOC boom began, there was a massive amount of hype.
I know.
And
ridiculous, wasn't it?
I suppose it recognized that how remarkable a possibility was there, and that there was a real wow factor. Mm-hmm. And when you say 20 million people are learning through your partner universities and institutions, that is absolutely extraordinary. And you think about it, previous generations would never have had access on their laptops, on their iPads or whatever, to such, on their mobile phones, to such a wealth of material. In that journey, in that progress to getting to 20 million people, has it worked out differently from how you expected?
Well, I think we weren't expecting the enormous uptake among academic institutions. And our original predictions, we said in 3 years we might have 15 or 20 university partners, and here we have 145. And I think one of the things that we've done is we've really catalyzed a transformation in which online education is no longer considered sort of a side thing that most respectable universities don't engage in. It's now part of the mainstream of institutional strategy for most universities, which I think is amazing. I also think that we didn't quite realize the extent to which we would enable and in fact catalyze a movement in which learning becomes lifelong, and people engage in learning throughout their careers, which of course is driven by societal needs, such as the fact that the skills that you need for a job today in many cases didn't even exist 15 or 20 years ago. Skills like data science or digital marketing. Think of digital marketing. 15 years ago, there was no Facebook. Marketing was about placing ads in newspapers. And so people now need to reskill throughout their lives, and there aren't a lot of good options out there until MOOCs and other similar things came along.
Are there any things which happened with your service you didn't expect? Are there any things that you thought Coursera would do that didn't turn out that way? What were the surprises when you went live and out there into the real world?
I think that we thought that the change within academic institutions might be a little bit more rapid. So I thought, for instance, the adoption of flipped classroom techniques and using the best of breed resources combined with some amount of on-campus teaching would move faster than it has so far. So that's one of the things that didn't work as well as we thought.
That's interesting. Because often universities are, as we know, they're centers of innovation, and they're very interested in driving change. But do you think that they themselves are rather conservative in how they behave?
I think they are. And if you think about it, think about a professional who went to sleep 150 years ago and would wake up today. So if you're a doctor who woke up today in a hospital after having been asleep for 150 years, you wouldn't recognize the place. Or a factory, or if you worked in the transportation industry, But if you were a university professor who went to sleep in his or her classroom, well, it would have been his back at the time, 150 years ago, and they would wake up today, it would look exactly the same. I mean, the blackboard is there, the seats are there, they would know exactly what to do.
Why is that, do you think? Why is it? Because exactly as you say, that even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, things have changed in most industries that most of us work in. And somehow universities have been resistant to that. And you still go to events which are about the impact of the digital world on higher education. Everyone else had that 25 years ago, we've been through that. And it seems odd now that we're still nearly there, and it's not. Is it ever going to change? Or?
Well, I'm sure it will, and I'm actually very optimistic about the effect that big data will now have on transforming education, because what you can measure, you can see when things are working and when things are not. And now we can measure so many aspects in the online space about interventions that are effective and interventions that aren't, and how students engage and how it affects their outcomes. And I think once you do that, it becomes something that you constantly, I hope, try to improve, and that's when I think we'll start seeing change. And it'll be, I hope, akin to the revolution that we've started to see in other areas that have turned from a science of the anecdotal to something that's a data science. Fields like astronomy, where prior to the Hubble Space Telescope, and it's like you were looking at, 2 stars for 10 years through a telescope, or if you're, and then now it's like a view of the entire universe that you get at once, and you can begin to ask questions that you couldn't even conceive of before. And I think the same thing will happen to human learning via the use of big data and the ability to experiment and constantly iterate and improve in ways that you just can't when you teach a class of 20 people on campus once a year.
And a question that I'm sure you've been asked every time since you began the very first day of Coursera is, when is this going to turn into a fully fledged, fully accredited degree that you could compare to a degree from another institution? Can you say something about maybe where you've got to and possibly what comes next?
So we've said all along that we have no intention of becoming an accredited academic institution on our own. We haven't changed that stance, but what we've been able to do is to work with some of our partners to enable them to provide an entire academic degree on Coursera in a way that is much more scalable, affordable, and accessible than has been possible before. So the first of our partners was the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, that started offering first an MBA degree on Coursera, and now more recently a Master's of Computer Science and Data Science, both of which are very high demand areas. And one of the nice things about these degrees is that they're not only considerably lower cost, in the case of the MBA, a quarter of the cost of what it would cost for a comparable program, they're also stackable, which is a really unique new perspective. A traditional degree is very binary, it's very 0-1. 80% of a degree is worth absolutely nothing in the marketplace. In these degrees, you basically get certificates for every step that you take along the way. These certificates have market value, so you can get a certificate in, say, digital marketing or corporate strategy, and it immediately gives you access to new job opportunities, even while you continue to work towards getting the rest of your master's degree. So I think that's a really interesting model, because as we know, we live in a world that's moving very quickly. The skills of today are not the ones that people went to school and learned 15 years ago. And where are you supposed to learn that today? You can't, most people, most working adults have obligations. They have a job, they have a family, they have a mortgage. They can't go back to school to get a master's degree in 2 years for 2 years just because they need a new set of skills. So this really expands the market of professional graduate education considerably, I think.
And I can see that being very, very successful, particularly in that, as you say, that professional graduate area. Can you see the same thing extending to the broad base of undergraduate education?
So I think that's a really interesting challenge, and one that I would love to see happening. I do think that there's something magical about certain undergraduate experiences. Those people who get to go to Oxford for 3 years or Princeton for 4 years, they have a really magical residential experience that I think is such a hugely beneficial thing. I don't expect to replace that. But I think most people don't realize how many undergraduates don't fit into this model of walking along green lawns next to ivy-clad buildings. 75% of students in the United States are non-traditional students, which means they are either working part-time while studying part-time, they already have families that they need to support, are older than 25 and trying to do this later on in life. 75%, most people don't realize that statistic. And for those students, the flexibility of having an online degree where the constraints fit around their life as opposed to the other way around, and that they can do while they're supporting a family, and they can do it at a considerably lower cost. I think that those benefits can be huge and might remove some of those cases where we're seeing that many people start a degree and just don't finish it and end up in debt without having a better job that can actually pay for that.
And if we were looking into a crystal ball for a few years ahead, do you think that perhaps some universities, perhaps some of your partners, will take that leap of faith and work with you on delivering perhaps something which is partly residential, partly online, that you will come up with a degree from a prestigious university that will be essentially, will have some of its building blocks will be from online Coursera courses?
I'm absolutely convinced that that will happen, and it'll be a lot earlier than 10 years. I think the societal need is there.
How soon do you think we could see it?
A full-blown undergraduate degree, I'd be surprised if that didn't happen within 5 years. Now, will it be fully online, or will it have some residential components, and what's the balance? I mean, that remains to be seen, but I expect that we will see that. And I think in parts of the world where the capacity of educational institutions is considerably lower than societal needs, places like India, for instance, where in order to reach their goal of having 30% of the population of the right age have undergraduate degrees as opposed to the current number, which is less than half that, 14%, they realize that they need to build, if they want to solve that problem using traditional means, they have to build 1,500 brick and mortar institutions. Now, even if you ignore the logistical challenges of building 1,500 campuses in India, they don't have enough faculty today, enough instructors who are qualified to teach even at the existing institutions. So where are you going to find faculty to staff 1,500 new ones? You need to have a different solution.
But why so far has there no one stepped forward who could enter that market? Because presumably for the winner of that race, the first one across the line, the potential gains are huge. If you were a well-established university who could open a properly accredited, reputable degree to a global classroom, that would be something of immense financial value and reputational value. So why have they hesitated?
Well, first of all, let me point out that it has only been 4 years. So it's not been that long. And you know, universities are, shall we say, not the most nimble of organizations, by and large. But I do think this will happen relatively soon. There are some institutional barriers having to do with, for instance, accreditors are not necessarily comfortable with at-scale teaching, and they feel, rightly or wrongly, that there is some level of personal interaction with the instructor that's really important. I would point out that personal interaction with an instructor is super important, but when you have a lecture hall of 300 people, you're not currently getting it, and somehow they seem to be okay with that. So I think accreditors need to be mindful of when you're looking at these programs, you're not comparing to some utopian ideal of 10 people sitting around the seminar room engaging deeply with an instructor. You're comparing to what is the reality in most large public institutions of very large lecture halls where, you know, one of my favorite quotes that I encountered in the Coursera journey is that distance learning starts in the third row.
Yes. So. It's very true. And also, there's been a very big debate in this country about contact hours, the number of hours that actually in traditional university courses, how much teaching they get. And often with humanities students, they might only get 5 or 6 hours a week, including lectures. So
lectures, they're not contact hours.
No, well, they count as
like
in the context of English higher education, they do, and they might only get 2 hours of seminars a week, which possibly opens the door to more flexible approaches.
Exactly.
But there is, as you mentioned there, the key problem, the key barrier seems to be accreditation, which is linked to exams which are invigilated or proctored, to use the American term. That seems to be the sticking point. If they give a degree from, if the university puts their name on a degree, they want to make sure that the student really has those skills. And is that something that is surmountable at scale? And are we getting close to that point?
I mean, I don't think the proctoring of exams has been the real barrier. I mean, universities like the Open University and the University of London have been doing proctoring of exams in exam centers worldwide for 150 years. Now there are digital technologies that allow you to do remote proctoring via webcam. They are surprisingly hard to beat in terms of cheating. So I don't think that that's been the barrier as much as the protection of the brand of, oh, I only do small scale teaching of in person. And I think that perception is the thing that we really need to break. It's not the technology that's been the barrier, it's the perception.
Now, everything in higher education eventually comes back to money and fees and also the capacity for institutions to deliver. How close, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to probe into your pocketbook, but how close is Coursera now to becoming a profit-making business which can survive and is no longer seen as philanthropic, but as actually financially viable?
Well, one of the things that we've been really excited about is the extent to which the credentials that we're providing are starting to have real value in the marketplace. Right now, we're the second largest provider of credentials on LinkedIn, right after Microsoft, which has been doing this for 25 years. And we know for a fact from both employers and prospective employees that if you put a data science certificate that you got via Coursera on your LinkedIn profile, you start getting calls from recruiters within a matter of a couple days. Employers tell us that when they do that, they're looking not only at the concrete skills that you developed by taking these courses, for instance, data science, although that too is a skill that is in very high demand, but also the testament to the fact that you are a successful lifelong learner, that you're able to deal with this kind of learning on your own and acquiring new skills throughout your career, which is a very important skill in the 21st century. So for those reasons, we know that these credentials have value and people are willing to pay for them. And I will say that our conversion rate, that is the number of people who come onto the platform and are willing to pay for the benefit of getting that kind of verified certificate, is actually is large and growing very rapidly. And so I think there is a viable business model. We're not profitable yet in the sense that we're covering our costs, but I don't think we're very far from getting there in terms of the current business model. And then, of course, you have business models like the degrees, which I think, again, if they're offered at scale, is another potential quite, these degrees are obviously at a higher price point because they offer more in-depth teaching, and I think that's another very exciting revenue model.
I'd like to carry on, but I can see we have 48 seconds before music starts playing and we're drowned out. So can I just say thank you very much indeed. It's fascinating. And I don't know if we'll still be calling MOOCs in the future, but you were there at the very beginning. And can I just ask everyone to give Daphne a bit of a round of applause for sharing those ideas. I think we're going to get some sort of theme music blaring out very soon. So.
Daphne, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been really an honor, and I think we can extend you a lifelong invitation to come here every year, maybe for a bit longer. and maybe if you want to join us in Singapore as well in November, we'll be very happy to have you. So
thank you
again
much
for coming. Thank you for making the trip. A big round of applause.
Thank you.